Jungkook made a playlist called For the Days When You're Tired. When Jimin heard it, he cried because every song was chosen on the day he almost gave up. A hidden playlist shatters Jimin as he learns Jungkook saved him with songs chosen on nights he almost gave up. I didn't know you were this close to disappearing. The words slipped out of Jungkook's mouth before he could stop them, hanging in the dim studio like a cracked note that refused to fade. Jimin's fingers froze above the keyboard. The rain outside lashed against the glass walls, blurring the city into streaks of silver and shadow. The only light in the room came from the monitor between them. On the screen glowed a playlist title in lowercase letters. For the Days When You're Tired. Jimin hadn't meant to click it. He had been searching for a demo file on Jungkook's laptop, humming absent-mindedly, unaware that he was about to walk straight into a memory that wasn't meant for him. But then he saw the title, and something in his chest tightened. It was too gentle, too specific. And when the first song began to play, he understood. The intro was soft, just piano and a tremor of strings. It was a song Jimin used to listen to in secret 3 years ago, the winter he had locked himself in his apartment and ignored calls for 2 days straight. The winter when the mirror felt like an enemy and every performance felt like a test he was doomed to fail. He remembered that night clearly, the city silent beneath fresh snow, his phone lighting up with missed messages, his own reflection pale and unfamiliar. He had sat on the kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, earbuds in, letting that very song loop until dawn. Now it was playing in Jungkook's studio. Jimin swallowed. Why do you have this? Jungkook didn't answer immediately. He walked closer, eyes never leaving the screen. There were dozens of songs listed. Each one was painfully familiar. Because each one belonged to a night Jimin had almost broken. You weren't answering anyone, Jungkook said finally, voice low. But you always posted what you were listening to, even if you deleted it later. Jimin's breath caught. He had thought no one noticed those fleeting posts. A lyric scribbled on a black screen. A timestamp at 3:17 a.m., a song shared and erased within minutes. I started keeping track, Jungkook continued. At first I thought it was coincidence, but every time you disappeared, every time you stopped smiling for real, there was always a song. The second track began. A different memory crashed over Jimin. The rehearsal room, sweat dripping into his eyes, the sharp echo of criticism that felt like knives. He had laughed it off in front of everyone, but later he had sat alone in the dark practice hall, replaying that song on his phone, telling himself he just needed to work harder, be better, be perfect. And the next morning, Jungkook had shown up early with 2 cups of coffee, pretending he just couldn't sleep. Jimin looked at him now, really looked at him. The faint scar on his eyebrow, the way his hands trembled slightly when he was emotional, but trying not to show it. Jungkook had always been sensitive beneath the confidence, absorbing the moods of everyone around him like oxygen. You were watching me, Jimin whispered. I was worried about you. The rain intensified, thunder rolling like distant applause. The playlist continued, song after song peeling open old wounds. There was the ballad from the night Jimin had read cruel comments until his vision blurred. The indie track from the tour bus, when exhaustion had turned into something darker, heavier. The instrumental piece from the hospital corridor when a family member had been ill and he hadn't known how to balance fear with responsibility. Each track was a timestamp of survival. You chose these on those days, Jimin asked. Jungkook nodded. Every time you almost gave up, I added the song to remind myself. To remind yourself of what? That you were still here. Silence flooded the room. Jimin felt something inside him crack, not painfully, but like ice melting after a long winter. He had spent years believing his struggles were invisible, that his smiles had been convincing enough to shield everyone else from the truth. He prided himself on being light, on being the one who comforted others. He hadn't realized someone had been quietly cataloging his darkness. You should have told me, Jimin said, though there was no accusation in his voice. I didn't want you to feel watched, Jungkook replied. I needed a way to cope with the fear. What fear? Jungkook hesitated. The confident performer dissolved, leaving behind the boy who had once followed Jimin around rehearsal rooms with wide, uncertain eyes. The fear that one day I'd knock on your door and you wouldn't answer, and it wouldn't be because you were sleeping. The words landed heavier than thunder. Jimin stepped back, breath shallow. He remembered that particular night, the one when everything had felt unbearably loud inside his head. He had stood by the balcony window, staring at the drop below, not with intent, but with a terrifying curiosity about silence. His phone had buzzed then, a message from Jungkook. "You ate." Just 2 words, casual, almost annoying in their simplicity. Jimin had rolled his eyes and typed back a sarcastic response, but the moment had passed, the silence had retreated. He looked at Jungkook now and understood. "You saved me," Jimin said softly. Jungkook shook his head immediately. "No, you stayed. I just stayed near you." The playlist reached its final track. Unlike the others, this one was new, released only last month. Jimin had listened to it on a particularly draining day when doubts crept back like old habits. He hadn't posted it, hadn't shared it anywhere. "How did you know about this one?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Jungkook's lips curved faintly. "You hum when you're sad." Jimin blinked. "You think no one notices, but you do. You hum the chorus over and over. That's how I knew which song it was." A laugh broke through Jimin's tears, fragile and disbelieving. "You're unbelievable." "No," Jungkook said gently, "I'm terrified." The confession hung between them. Jungkook had always been known for ambition, discipline, relentless drive, but beneath that was a fear of losing the people he loved. He carried it quietly, turning it into action rather than words. He trained harder, watched closer, listened more carefully. This playlist was his shield against helplessness. Jimin stepped forward until they were only inches apart. The studio smelled faintly of coffee and rain-damp fabric. The monitor light reflected in Jungkook's eyes, making them look almost glassy. "Why call it that?" Jimin asked. "For the days when you're tired." "Because I didn't want it to be about giving up," Jungkook replied. "I wanted it to be about resting. You're allowed to be tired. You're not allowed to disappear." Tears slid down Jimin's cheeks before he could stop them. Not dramatic sobs, just quiet, steady evidence of something shifting inside him. He had always feared being a burden, feared that his vulnerability would weigh others down. But this was proof that his existence mattered enough for someone to build an archive of his survival. Jimin reached past Jungkook and clicked share. "What are you doing?" Jungkook asked, startled. "Making a copy," Jimin said, voice steadier now, "for you." Jungkook frowned slightly. "You think you're the only one who gets scared?" Jimin continued. "You carry everyone, you smile like you're indestructible, but I've seen you too." He thought of the nights Jungkook stayed in the studio long after everyone left, chasing perfection until his hands shook. The mornings when dark circles framed his eyes, dismissed with a shrug. The rare moments when frustration flickered across his face before he buried it. "You hum when you're anxious," Jimin added softly. "Different rhythm, same habit." Jungkook let out a breath that sounded almost like surrender. "So," Jimin said, wiping his face, "we'll keep this, but not just as a reminder of bad days." He began adding songs, ones from rehearsals filled with laughter, from road trips where they sang off-key at the top of their lungs, from quiet hotel rooms where exhaustion turned into whispered conversations about dreams beyond stages and spotlights. "If yours is for when I'm tired," Jimin said, "this one is for when you forget you're human." Jungkook watched him, something warm and aching blooming in his chest. The rain outside began to soften, the storm easing into a steady drizzle. The city lights sharpened again, no longer blurred by sheets of water. The studio felt different now, not heavy, not tense, just intimate, honest. When the new playlist finished compiling, Jimin pressed play. The first song was bright, almost reckless with joy. It filled the room with a sound that didn't belong to sorrow or fear. Jungkook laughed under his breath. That's your choice. It's ours, Jimin corrected. They stood there listening, shoulders brushing, not speaking. There was no need. The past still existed, the near breaking points, the nights of doubt, but they no longer felt like solitary battles. They were shared history, evidence of endurance. Jimin realized something then. He hadn't almost given up because he was weak. He had almost given up because he was exhausted from trying to be unbreakable. And Jungkook hadn't made the playlist because he thought Jimin was fragile. He had made it because he understood that strength sometimes looks like quietly pressing play and waiting for morning. The final note of the song faded into the soft hum of equipment. Jimin exhaled slowly. Next time I'm tired, he said, I'll tell you. Jungkook nodded. Next time I'm scared, I'll tell you. Outside, the rain stopped completely. The city breathed. And in the quiet studio, two playlists sat side by side, testaments not to the days they almost disappeared, but to the choice they kept making again and again to stay. The glass shattered before either of them realized the argument had already gone too far. It wasn't thrown, it wasn't even dramatic. Jungkook's hand had simply hit the edge of the table too hard, and the empty coffee cup toppled, exploding against the studio floor with a crack that split the fragile piece they had built the night before. You think this fixes everything? Jungkook's voice was no longer soft. It was raw, almost hoarse. A playlist and a promise. Jimin stared at him, stunned. The rain-washed calm from yesterday had evaporated, replaced by a tension so thick it felt like smoke in his lungs. I never said it fixes everything, Jimin shot back, but it's a start. Jungkook ran a hand through his hair, packing like a caged animal. The studio lights felt harsher tonight, bleaching the warmth from his skin. You don't get it. You think I made that playlist because I'm gentle, because I'm thoughtful. Why else would you? Jimin demanded. Because I was angry. The confession landed like a punch. Jimin blinked, angry at me. Yes, Jungkook snapped, stepping closer. Every time you shut down, every time you decided on your own that you weren't enough, you didn't even think about what that would do to the rest of us. Jimin's chest tightened. So my breaking down is selfish now. That's not what I'm saying. It sounds exactly like that. Their voices echoed off the walls, bouncing back sharper, uglier. Outside, traffic roared faintly below, indifferent to the war unfolding several floors above. Jungkook's jaw clenched. Do you know what it's like to feel useless? To see someone you love slipping and not be able to reach them? You act like you're the only one fighting something. Jimin's eyes burned. I never asked you to carry me. You didn't have to, I chose to. Silence detonated between them. Jimin turned away first, pressing his palms against the cold glass window. The city glittered beneath them, unaware of how small and fragile everything felt up here. You think I wanted to feel like that, Jimin said quietly. You think I enjoyed standing on that balcony wondering if silence would be easier. Jungkook's anger flickered, but didn't vanish. Then why didn't you tell me? Because I was ashamed, Jimin spun around, voice breaking. Because everyone already sees me as the emotional one, the soft one, the one who needs reassurance. I didn't want to confirm it. Jungkook's breathing slowed, but his eyes were still stormy. You're not weak for hurting. That's easy for you to say. No, it's not. His laugh was bitter. You think I don't break, I just don't let you see it. Jimin stared at him. For years, Jungkook had been the golden standard, disciplined, ambitious, relentlessly improving. He stumbled rarely, and when he did, he masked it with a grin and another hour of practice. What are you talking about? Jimin asked. Jungkook hesitated, then grabbed his phone from the table. He scrolled quickly, jaw tight, before thrusting the screen toward Jimin. It was an article draft, an anonymous forum post, but the details were unmistakable. It criticized Jungkook's recent solo project, calling it overhyped, emotionally hollow, carried by image rather than talent. I saw this the night it was posted, Jungkook said. I was in the studio alone. I replayed it in my head for hours. I almost scrapped the entire album. Jimin's expression softened. Why didn't you tell me? Jungkook's lips curved into something painful. Because I didn't want to be the one who needed saving for once. The words hit deeper than any shout. They stood there, two people who had spent years protecting each other by hiding the very things that made them human. You always look so sure, Jimin whispered. I'm not, Jungkook replied immediately. I'm terrified that one bad step will prove everyone right, that I peaked too early, that I'm just lucky. The vulnerability in his voice sliced through the remaining anger. Jimin stepped closer again, but this time cautiously, as if approaching something wounded. Why didn't you make a playlist for yourself? Jimin asked softly. Jungkook let out a shaky breath, because I didn't think I deserved one. The admission cracked something open. Before Jimin could respond, the studio door suddenly opened with a sharp click. They both turned. Their manager stood in the doorway, expression grim. He hadn't meant to walk into this, but he had heard enough. There's something you both need to see, he said. The air shifted instantly. Jungkook and Jimin followed him to the conference room down the hall. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, making everything feel sterile, unreal. A large screen displayed social media feeds, scrolling at dizzying speed. Speculation. Rumors. Clips from live broadcasts, dissected frame by frame. Headlines questioning their closeness. A leaked photo from the studio last night, Jimin's tear-streaked face, Jungkook standing inches away, captured through the window by a long lens. Someone sold it, the manager said flatly, and it's spreading fast. Jimin felt the blood drain from his face. They're twisting it. They always do, Jungkook muttered. The comments were brutal. Accusations, conspiracies, mockery, fans fighting other fans in endless threads of digital warfare. Jimin's hands trembled. This is my fault. No, Jungkook said immediately. If I hadn't. Don't. The manager rubbed his temples. We can deny, we can ignore, or we can address it directly. Address what? Jungkook demanded. That we care about each other. That's exactly what they'll turn against you. The room felt smaller by the second. Jimin stared at the screen, at strangers dissecting moments they didn't understand. He had spent years battling private demons. Now the battlefield was public. They already think I'm unstable, Jimin murmured. If they connect this to my past breaks. Jungkook's voice cut through, sharp and decisive. Then we tell the truth. The manager looked alarmed. Be careful. The truth, Jungkook repeated, that we struggle, that we lean on each other, that being strong doesn't mean being alone. You'll ignite another storm, the manager warned. Jungkook met Jimin's eyes. I don't care. Jimin saw it then, not recklessness, but resolve. The same resolve that had fueled endless practice nights, the same fire that had built his career from nothing. But this time, it wasn't about perfection. It was about honesty. You're willing to risk that? Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook didn't hesitate. I was willing to lose sleep tracking your darkest nights. You think I won't risk a headline? Emotions surged up Jimin's throat, thick and overwhelming. The manager sighed heavily. If you do this, there's no halfway. Jimin inhaled slowly. For years, he had feared being seen at his weakest, feared that transparency would shatter the carefully curated image of resilience. But maybe the image was the problem. He reached for Jungkook's hand under the conference table. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't for cameras. It was grounding. Let them talk, Jimin said, voice steadier now. I'm tired of hiding. Jungkook squeezed his hand back. Within hours, they were seated in front of a live camera. No stage lights, no choreography, just two chairs and the weight of expectation pressing down like gravity. The broadcast began. Jungkook spoke first, not with anger but with clarity. He talked about exhaustion, about pressure, about nights when success felt heavier than failure. He didn't mention the balcony or the article, but the emotion in his voice carried the truth anyway. Then Jimin spoke. He didn't cry this time. His voice wavered once, but he kept going. I almost gave up more than once, he admitted. Not on my career, on myself, and I stayed because someone noticed, not because I was strong alone. The chat exploded in real time. Shock, support, criticism, love. Jimin continued, anyway. We're not perfect, we're not unbreakable, we're human, and if you're tired, if you're struggling, that doesn't make you weak, it makes you alive. Jungkook glanced at him, pride and something softer flickering across his face. When the broadcast ended, silence filled the studio again. But it was different from the night before. This silence wasn't heavy with secrets. It was raw, exposed, uncertain, but honest. Jimin exhaled shakily. Well, that was terrifying. Jungkook let out a breathless laugh. Yeah. Their phones buzzed non-stop, notifications flooding in faster than they could process. Praise, backlash, debates, support messages from fans admitting their own battles. Jimin scrolled through one message that simply read, I stayed tonight because of you. His vision blurred. Jungkook leaned his head lightly against Jimin's shoulder, exhaustion finally settling into his bones. You still think a playlist doesn't fix anything, Jimin murmured. Jungkook smiled faintly. Maybe it doesn't fix everything. He intertwined their fingers again, this time without hesitation. But maybe it keeps people here long enough to try. Outside, the city lights flickered like distant stars, fragile but persistent against the dark. The door slammed so hard the frame rattled, and this time it wasn't an accident. You went live without final approval. The executive's voice cracked through the conference room like a whip. Jungkook didn't flinch. Jimin felt it, though, the tremor under his calm, the way his fingers tightened briefly at his side before relaxing again. We said what we needed to say, Jungkook replied evenly. You don't get to decide that alone. The room was colder than usual, air conditioning humming too loud, fluorescent lights bleaching every face into something harsher and more unforgiving. 3 executives sat across from them, tablets open, screens glowing with numbers. Trending charts. Engagement spikes. Stock fluctuations. Damage assessments. It's not just about feelings, one of them said sharply. It's about contracts. Sponsors are nervous, investors are calling. Jimin swallowed. He could feel the familiar creeping sensation under his skin, the urge to apologize, to smooth things over, to take responsibility even when it wasn't entirely his. We didn't say anything scandalous, Jimin said carefully. We talked about mental health. You implied instability. The word hit like a slap. Jungkook leaned forward, eyes darkening. We implied humanity. The executive's jaw tightened. Humanity doesn't trend cleanly. Silence fell heavy and suffocating. Jimin felt heat rise in his chest. So what would you prefer, he asked quietly, that we lie, smile, pretend none of us ever struggle? We prefer control. There it was, not concern, not protection, control. Jungkook let out a short, humorless laugh. You can control choreography, you can control lighting, you can't control whether someone feels like they're drowning. This is bigger than you, the executive snapped. No, Jungkook shot back, this is exactly about us. The tension sharpened, slicing through whatever professionalism had been holding the conversation together. One of the executives turned the tablet around and slid it across the table. You want honesty? Look at this. It was a sponsor statement, carefully worded, distancing language, words like monitoring the situation and re-evaluating partnerships. Jimin's stomach dropped. They're reconsidering, the executive said flatly, Because vulnerability doesn't sell stability. Jungkook's hand slammed onto the table, this time on purpose. Then maybe we shouldn't be selling stability. The room went still. Jimin looked at him sharply. That wasn't just anger, that was a line being drawn. You're under contract, another executive warned. For how long? Jungkook asked calmly. The question lingered in the air like smoke. Jimin's pulse quickened. He hadn't expected this turn. The live broadcast had been bold, but this felt like something irreversible. Don't be reckless, Jimin murmured under his breath. Jungkook glanced at him, something fierce and protective in his gaze. I'm not being reckless, I'm being done. With what? Jimin asked. With pretending that survival is a weakness. The executives exchanged looks. You're emotional right now, one of them said, voice measured. Take time, let this settle, we'll release a clarifying statement. No, Jimin said suddenly. Everyone turned to him. He felt his heart hammering, but he didn't look away. No clarifying statement, no backtracking. If we apologize for telling the truth, what does that say to the people who listened? The executive's patience snapped. It says you're professionals. It says we're cowards, Jungkook countered. The word hung there, ugly and undeniable. The meeting dissolved shortly after that, not with resolution, but with cold warnings about consequences and damage control. When the door finally shut behind them, the hallway felt strangely silent. Jimin exhaled slowly. You were going to walk away. Jungkook didn't deny it, if it came to that. You didn't even look at me first. Jungkook stopped walking. The corridor lights cast sharp shadows across his face. If I looked at you, I might have hesitated. Hesitated to what? Blow up everything we've built. Hesitated to protect you. Jimin's frustration flared. I don't need you to destroy your career for me. It's not just for you. Then what is it? Jungkook's composure cracked. It's for the version of me that almost believed those articles, the version of you that almost stepped off that balcony. It's for every time we swallowed something because it was better for the image. I'm tired of being packaged. The rawness in his voice burned. Jimin stepped closer, lowering his voice. And what happens if they actually cut funding, if projects get cancelled, if tours get postponed? Then we adapt. You say that like it's easy. I didn't say it's easy, Jungkook snapped. I said it's necessary. Jimin felt anger surge up to meet his. You don't get to make that decision alone. And you don't get to keep shrinking yourself to make everyone else comfortable. The words collided, explosive and unforgiving. Jimin froze. Shrinking. That was the word he hadn't known. He'd been living inside. They stood inches apart now, breaths uneven. You think I'm shrinking? Jimin asked quietly. I think you're still trying to be digestible, Jungkook replied, even now. The accusations strung because it wasn't entirely wrong. Before Jimin could respond, his phone buzzed sharply in his pocket. He pulled it out, expecting another notification storm. It was a private message from an unknown number. He hesitated, then opened it. A photo filled the screen. It was older, grainy, taken from outside his apartment building years ago. The balcony, the railing, the angle unmistakable. Jimin's blood ran cold. What? Jungkook demanded, seeing his expression. Jimin wordlessly handed him the phone. Jungkook's jaw tightened as he read the message beneath the image. We know it wasn't just tiredness. Be careful what you confess next time. The hallway suddenly felt too narrow. They're bluffing, Jungkook said immediately, but his voice had shifted. It's from years ago, Jimin whispered. I thought no one saw. Someone did. Jungkook's protective instinct ignited visibly. Give me the number. What are you going to do? Find out who thinks they can threaten you. Jimin grabbed his wrist. Don't. I'm not letting this slide. And I'm not letting you spiral. They stared at each other, fear replacing anger. This wasn't gossip anymore, it was intimidation. Jungkook forced himself to breathe. Okay, we handle it properly, security, legal. Jimin nodded, though his hands were trembling. The emotional high of the broadcast had crashed into something darker. The world they had pushed against was pushing back. Later that night, they were back in the studio, but the atmosphere had shifted again, not soft like before, not explosive like earlier. Tense. Electric. Jimin sat on the couch, staring at the silent phone in his hands. Jungkook stood by the window, scanning the street below as if expecting someone to be watching. You regret it? Jimin asked suddenly. Jungkook didn't turn, no. Even now. Especially now. Jimin looked up at him. You're scared. Yes. Good, Jimin said quietly. So am I. Jungkook finally turned around. You think that makes this a mistake? No, Jimin replied. I think it makes it real. A fragile understanding settled between them. Jungkook walked over and sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. If they try to weaponize your worst moment, Jungkook said softly, we take the power back. How? We tell the story ourselves. Jimin's breath caught, all of it. If we have to. The idea was terrifying, exposing not just exhaustion but the brink, the balcony, the thoughts he had barely survived. You'd stand there with me, Jimin asked. Jungkook didn't hesitate, always. The word wasn't dramatic, it was steady. Jimin leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling. I hate that they found that photo. I hate that you were alone that night, Jungkook replied. You texted me. I didn't know why I felt like I needed to. Jimin closed his eyes briefly. Fate, instinct, love, whatever it had shifted the course of his life. His phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a threat. It was a message from a fan account, a screenshot of the live broadcast captioned with a simple line. Staying is brave. Jimin showed Jungkook. Jungkook's expression softened. See. Brave doesn't feel like this, Jimin murmured. What does it feel like? Like standing in the middle of a storm and deciding not to run. Jungkook gave a small nod, then we stay. Outside, the city lights flickered against the glass, unaware of the battles being fought in quiet rooms above. The threat still lingered, the contract still loomed, the consequences were far from settled. But for the first time, fear wasn't isolating. It was shared. And that changed everything. The press conference was not supposed to happen that night. It was meant to be delayed, carefully filtered, polished by legal teams and media strategists until every sentence felt safe enough to swallow. But the second message changed that. It arrived an hour before midnight. This time, it wasn't just a photo. It was a short video clip. Grainy, distant, taken from across the street years ago. Jimin standing on the balcony, hands gripping the railing, unmoving for too long. The message beneath it was colder than the first. Confess properly, or we will. Jimin felt his heartbeat in his throat. Jungkook didn't speak for a long time after watching it. His jaw flexed once, twice. Then his entire posture shifted into something terrifyingly calm. Release it, Jungkook said. Jimin blinked. What? We go live, now. The manager, who had rushed over after receiving the forwarded message, looked horrified. Absolutely not. This is blackmail. We contact authorities. We will, Jungkook replied, but we're not waiting. You're reacting emotionally. Yes, Jungkook said flatly, because this is emotional. Jimin stood up slowly, packing the length of the studio. The memory of that night was clawing its way back into his chest, the cold wind against his skin, the distant traffic below, the suffocating silence inside his head. I don't want them to see it like that, Jimin whispered, like I was a headline waiting to happen. Jungkook stepped in front of him, then don't let them frame it. You don't understand, Jimin's voice cracked. That wasn't just exhaustion, that was me losing to myself. And you didn't, Jungkook shot back. I almost did. The words echoed violently. The manager looked between them, torn. If you do this without containment, the narrative could spiral. Investors. Investors can survive discomfort, Jungkook cut in. He barely survived that night. Silence slammed into the room. Jimin stared at Jungkook, no hesitation, no calculation, just fury on his behalf. You're shaking, Jungkook said softly. I'm angry, Jimin replied. Good. Don't say that like it's empowering. It is, Jungkook insisted. You've been ashamed of that night for years. Why? Because I scared myself. And I scared the people who love me. Jungkook stepped closer. You didn't scare me, you terrified me. That's not better. It is, Jungkook said, voice rising, because terror means I cared enough to feel it. The manager rubbed his face. If you're doing this, we need structure, no improvising. Jungkook's gaze never left Jimin. We're not improvising, we are telling the truth. Jimin closed his eyes briefly, inhaling deep. When he opened them again, something had shifted. Set it up, he said. The live broadcast began without promotion. No flashy announcement, no teaser. Just a notification. The studio lights were dimmer this time, not dramatic, just honest, the same couch, the same 2 chairs. But the energy was different. Roll. Jimin spoke first. There's a video someone is threatening to release, he said plainly. It's old. It shows me on a balcony years ago. The comment feed exploded instantly. Jungkook didn't look at the screen. He looked at Jimin. I wasn't performing, Jimin continued. I wasn't filming. I wasn't thinking about anyone watching. I was tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. His hands were steady, surprisingly so. I wasn't trying to jump, he clarified, but I was standing too close to the edge of myself. The room felt impossibly quiet despite the thousands of viewers flooding in. I felt small, Jimin admitted. Small compared to expectations, small compared to my own standards. I thought if I disappeared for a moment, maybe the pressure would stop. Jungkook's jaw tightened. And then my phone buzzed, Jimin said, voice softer now. It was him. He glanced at Jungkook. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't poetic, just 2 words, you ate. A faint ripple of sound escaped Jungkook's throat, almost a disbelieving laugh. That text irritated me, Jimin confessed, but it anchored me. It reminded me I wasn't floating alone in my head. The comment section shifted, less chaos, more stillness. Jungkook leaned forward. I didn't know he was on a balcony, Jungkook said. I just had a feeling that night. He goes quiet in a specific way. It's like the air changes. Jimin glanced at him. You make it sound supernatural. It's not, Jungkook replied. It's paying attention. He turned to the camera now. If someone wants to release that video to shame him, go ahead, Jungkook said, voice sharp. You won't expose weakness. You'll expose survival. The boldness sent another wave through the live feed. Jimin felt heat behind his eyes, but didn't look away. I'm not embarrassed of that night anymore, he said. I'm not proud of it either. It was messy, it was human. A pause. But I stayed. The words hung heavy and triumphant at the same time. The live ended 30 minutes later. Phones immediately lit up with reactions. Some outlets praised the vulnerability. Others called it strategic oversharing. One headline labeled it emotional manipulation. Jimin read that one aloud with a hollow laugh, manipulation. Jungkook snatched the phone gently from his hand. Stop reading. You don't read. I do, Jungkook admitted, and I hate what it does to me. Jimin studied him. What does it do? It makes me want to fight everyone. That's not healthy. I know. The manager burst back into the room, breathless. The blackmailer account just deleted everything. Both of them looked up. What? Jimin asked. Gone, wiped. Legal is tracing IP addresses, but whoever it was panicked. Jungkook exhaled slowly, tension draining from his shoulders. Jimin felt something strange bloom in his chest, not victory. Relief. And something else. You didn't look scared, Jimin said quietly once they were alone again. I was, Jungkook replied. I just refused to let fear speak first. Jimin's lips trembled faintly. You're reckless. I'm protective. That's worse. Jungkook smirked faintly. You're welcome. Silence fell, but not uncomfortable. Jimin stared at the blank monitor where the live chat had scrolled minutes ago. Do you ever think we pushed too far? He asked. Jungkook considered it. Yes. And I'd rather push than suffocate. Jimin leaned back into the couch, exhaustion finally settling into his bones. I don't want to be brave all the time. You're not, Jungkook said softly. Sometimes you're just honest. That feels harder. It is. Jimin turned his head slightly. Why are you so calm now? I'm not calm, Jungkook admitted. I'm furious. At who? At the idea that someone thought they could use your worst night as leverage. Jimin's chest tightened. You're not a scandal, Jungkook continued. You're not a cautionary tale. You're not a fragile narrative for people to dissect. And what am I? Jungkook didn't hesitate. You're the reason I learned to pay attention. The confession lingered, warm and dangerous. Jimin's breath hitched slightly. That's a lot of responsibility. It's not a burden, Jungkook said quietly. It's a choice. Outside, the city had gone quiet. Midnight had slipped into something softer. Jimin looked down at his hands. I don't feel like I almost disappeared anymore, he admitted. Good. I feel like I almost didn't know how to ask for help. Jungkook nodded. That's different. Jimin studied him in the low light. And you? What about me? When you almost believed those articles, who pulled you back? Jungkook hesitated. You, he said finally. Jimin blinked. I didn't do anything. You showed up to rehearsal early, Jungkook replied. You didn't say anything about the criticism. You just practiced with me until 3 in the morning, like it was normal. Jimin frowned slightly. That's not heroic. It was to me. The realization settled slowly between them. They had been saving each other in small, unremarkable ways for years. Not grand gestures, just presence. Jimin's voice dropped to a whisper. I'm still scared. Me too. Of what comes next? Jungkook reached out, fingers brushing Jimin's wrist, grounding. Then we face that too, he said. No dramatic vow, no grandstanding. Just certainty. For the first time since the messages began, the fear felt smaller than the connection holding them in place. And that, more than any headline or threat, felt like something no one could take away. The knock on the studio door came at 2:17 a.m., slow and deliberate, like someone who knew exactly how much damage they were about to cause. Jungkook stiffened instantly. No one should be here, Jimin murmured. The building was supposed to be locked at midnight. Security had been doubled after the blackmail attempt. Their manager had insisted on it. The knock came again, 3 times, calm, patient. Jungkook stood first. Stay here. Don't do that, Jimin snapped quietly. Don't tell me to stay. Another knock, louder this time. Jungkook ignored the argument and moved toward the door anyway, jaw set. Jimin followed 2 steps behind, heart pounding hard enough to make his vision pulse. When Jungkook pulled the door open, neither of them expected the face on the other side. It wasn't a stranger. It was someone they both knew. Minkook, former trainee, former friend, the one who had left the company 3 years ago after a quiet, unceremonious contract termination. He looked thinner, older, eyes shadowed by something that wasn't just exhaustion. "You look surprised," Minkook said flatly. Jimin's stomach dropped. "How did you get in?" "I still know the codes," Minkook replied, stepping inside without invitation. "Security hasn't changed them." Jungkook's expression hardened instantly. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking." The air shifted. Jimin felt it before Jungkook did, the tension under Minkook's stillness. Not explosive, calculated. "You sent the messages," Jimin said quietly. Minkook didn't deny it. Jungkook's hands curled into fists. "You filmed that." "I didn't film it," Minkook replied. "I bought it." Silence detonated. "You bought it," Jungkook repeated, voice dangerously low. "There are people who specialize in that kind of thing," Minkook continued calmly. "They watch buildings, they sell footage. You'd be surprised how much of your lives exist in someone else's archive." Jimin's throat tightened. "Why?" Minkook's composure cracked for the first time. "Because you get to talk about survival like it's poetic," he snapped, "like it's noble, and some of us didn't survive the same way." Jungkook stepped forward. "Don't." "Don't what?" Minkook shot back. "Tell the truth. You two go live and suddenly you're brave. Suddenly you're icons of vulnerability." His voice rose with every word. "You think I didn't stand on a balcony too?" Minkook demanded. "You think I didn't feel that same pressure? The difference is no one texted me." The accusation hung heavy and ugly. Jimin felt like the floor had tilted. "I didn't know," Jimin whispered. "Exactly," Minkook said. Jungkook's anger flared. "So you blackmail him?" "I wanted you to feel it," Minkook snapped. "The fear, the exposure, the helplessness." "You think threatening him fixes what happened to you?" Jungkook's voice was ice. Minkook laughed, but it was hollow. "No, but watching you control the narrative like your martyrs, that made me sick." Jimin stepped forward before Jungkook could respond again. "What happened?" Jimin asked. Minkook's jaw clenched. "You know what happened? I didn't debut. I didn't get a second chance. I got labeled unstable and quietly removed." Jungkook froze. "That wasn't." "It wasn't your decision," Minkook cut in sharply. "I know, but you were there." The accusation wasn't about blame. It was about absence. Jimin felt guilt coil inside his chest. He remembered the whispers back then, the sudden shift in schedules, the polite corporate language about creative differences. He hadn't asked enough questions. "You think we had power?" Jungkook demanded. "We were barely holding onto our own positions." "But you made it," Minkook said bitterly, "and I didn't." Silence swallowed the room. Jimin's voice softened. "So this is about revenge?" "It's about reality," Minkook replied. "You get to redefine weakness because you're successful. If I said the same things, they'd call me unstable again." The truth in that strung. Jungkook's anger wavered, but didn't vanish. "You still crossed a line." "Yes," Minkook admitted without hesitation. "I did." The calmness of that admission was more unsettling than denial would have been. "You could have talked to us," Jimin said. "And said what?" Minkook shot back. "Hey, remember me, the almost member, the almost story, the almost survivor." Jimin flinched. Jungkook's voice dropped lower. "You don't get to weaponize someone's lowest moment. And you don't get to package yours into inspiration without acknowledging the ones who fell through the cracks," Minkook countered. The argument wasn't just personal anymore, it was systemic, messy, complicated. Jimin's thoughts raced. "Why come here?" he asked quietly. "You already deleted the account." Minkook's eyes flickered. "Because I didn't expect you to say it like that," he admitted. "Say what?" That you weren't trying to jump, that you were just lost. His voice faltered slightly. I thought if I pushed you, you'd deny it, spin it, protect the brand. Jungkook exhaled slowly. We almost did. Minyi looked at him sharply. But we didn't, Jimin said. Another heavy silence. Minyi's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him all at once. You know what the worst part is, he muttered. I watched that live and felt proud and angry at the same time. Why angry? Jimin asked. Because I wanted someone to do that for me. The confession fractured something in the room. Jungkook's fist slowly unclenched. You think no one noticed you? Jungkook asked quietly. Minyi scoffed. Don't. I did, Jungkook insisted. You stayed later than anyone. You practiced until your voice gave out. I thought you were stronger than me. Minyi stared at him, stunned. Jimin nodded slowly. You were the first one who told me it was okay to rest during evaluation week. Minyi's expression shifted, cracks forming in the bitterness. That was a long time ago, he said weakly. Not for us, Jimin replied. The tension didn't disappear, but it changed shape. You still need to answer for what you did, Jungkook said firmly. You scared him. I know, Minyi whispered. You scared me, Jungkook added. Minyi's gaze flicked up. Jimin stepped between them slightly, not as a shield, but as balance. We can't undo what happened, Jimin said. To you, to me, but this isn't the way. Minyi let out a shaky breath. I didn't come to threaten you tonight. Then why are you here? Jungkook asked. Because I don't want to be the villain in your story, Minyi admitted. The honesty was almost disarming. Jimin felt the weight of that, how easy it would be to reduce Minyi to the antagonist, the jealous extrainee, the bitter outsider. But pain wasn't that simple. You're not a villain, Jimin said softly. You're hurt. Minyi laughed bitterly. That doesn't excuse what I did. No, Jungkook agreed. It doesn't. Another long silence stretched between them. Finally, Minyi reached into his pocket and placed a small flash drive on the table. That's everything, he said. The original footage, the transaction trail, names. Jungkook didn't touch it yet. Why give it to us? Because I don't want to become the thing I hated. The vulnerability in that sentence was raw and unpolished. Jimin stepped forward. What do you want now? Minyi hesitated. I don't know. Honesty again, uncomfortable, real. Jungkook finally picked up the flash drive. We're not going to protect you from consequences, he said. I know. But we're not going to destroy you either, Jimin added. Minyi's eyes glistened briefly, though he looked away quickly. I shouldn't have done it, he said quietly. No, Jungkook replied, you shouldn't have. The door felt heavier when Minyi finally walked out. The studio fell into silence once more. Jimin sank onto the couch, exhausted in a way that went beyond adrenaline. Jungkook sat beside him, staring at the flash drive in his palm. That could have gone worse, Jimin murmured. It almost did. Jimin leaned his head back. Do you hate him? Jungkook thought about it. No, he said finally. I hate what this industry does to people. Jimin nodded slowly. The storm hadn't been a faceless enemy after all. It had a name, a history, a wound. Jungkook looked at Jimin, expression softer now, but still intense. You still okay? Jimin considered the question carefully. I'm not on a balcony, he said quietly. Jungkook's lips twitched faintly. Good. But I'm realizing survival isn't just about staying alive, Jimin continued. It's about what we do with the staying. Jungkook glanced at the door Minyi had exited through. Then we do better, he said. No shouting now, no threats. Just a fragile understanding that the line between victim and villain was thinner than they'd thought. and that choosing not to fall sometimes meant pulling someone else back from the edge too. The boardroom smelled like polished wood and quiet hostility. Jimin felt it the second they stepped inside. Not anger. Calculation. 7 executives sat around the long table, legal representatives beside them, screens already lit with documents and projections. The flash drive Jungkook had handed over that morning had detonated more than just a blackmail scheme. It had exposed unauthorized surveillance, illegal footage trading, and more dangerously, internal negligence. Minyi hadn't been bluffing about the transaction trail. And now the company was in damage control mode. "You should have brought this to us immediately," the senior director said, fingers steepled. Jungkook didn't sit, we did. After going live twice, without approval. Jimin inhaled slowly, forcing his pulse down. "We were being threatened." "You were being manipulated," another executive corrected. "There's a difference." "And whose fault is that?" Jungkook shot back. "Security codes weren't updated. Trainees were cut without proper support. Cameras outside private residences were never investigated." The director's eyes sharpened. "Be careful." "No," Jungkook replied calmly. "You be careful." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Jimin stepped in before it escalated too fast. "We're not here to attack anyone. We are here because this isn't just about us. It's always about you," one executive muttered under their breath. Jimin heard it. Jungkook definitely heard it. "You think we enjoy this?" Jungkook asked, voice dangerously even. "You think we wanted to expose internal failures publicly?" "You made it public," the legal advisor snapped. "Because silence was suffocating," Jimin said firmly. The director leaned back. "What exactly do you want?" There it was. Not apology. Not understanding. Terms. Jungkook and Jimin exchanged a brief look. They had discussed this all night after Minyi left. Every possibility, every consequence. Jungkook spoke first. "Reform." A few executives scoffed quietly. "We want transparent mental health resources," Jungkook continued, "for trainees, for artists, not just PR statements. That's already in development." "No," Jimin cut in, surprising even himself with the sharpness in his tone. "Not performative resources, real ones, independent professionals, confidential access." "You're stepping into territory beyond your contracts," the director warned. Jungkook's gaze didn't waver, then adjust the contracts. The room went still. "Excuse me," the legal advisor asked. "You heard me," Jungkook said. Jimin's heart pounded. This was the line, the one that couldn't be uncrossed. "If we're expected to represent strength and resilience," Jungkook continued, "then build a system that supports it." "And if we refuse?" the director asked coolly. Jungkook didn't hesitate. "Then we reconsider renewal." The words exploded across the table like a grenade. Jimin felt the weight of them immediately. Years of work, loyalty, history. The director's expression hardened. "You're bluffing." Jungkook's voice dropped lower. "Try me." Silence suffocated the room. Jimin felt adrenaline surge through him, but beneath it was something steadier. Conviction. "You don't get to threaten us with instability while ignoring the instability you created," Jimin said. Minyi wasn't an isolated case. A flicker of discomfort passed across a few faces. The legal advisor shifted in their seat. "Are you implying systemic negligence?" "I'm implying burnout isn't a personality flaw," Jimin replied. The director's patience snapped. "You're artists, not policymakers." Jungkook leaned forward slowly. "We're the product, and we're tired of pretending the factory doesn't leak." The metaphor hit harder than shouting would have. One of the younger executives finally spoke up, voice cautious. "If this becomes public, investors will panic." "It's already public," Jungkook said. "And if you walk away," the director added coldly. You risk losing more than you think. There it was. The threat. Jimin's stomach tightened, but he refused to look away. Are you threatening to blacklist us? He asked quietly. The director didn't answer directly. The industry is smaller than you imagine. Jungkook's lips curved faintly, but there was no humor in it. So is patience. The tension was unbearable now. Finally, the director exhaled sharply. What exactly are your demands? Jimin spoke clearly, steady despite the storm inside him. Independent counseling contracts not controlled by management, updated security protocols, transparent trainee exit processes, and public acknowledgement that vulnerability isn't a liability. You're asking for structural change in exchange for renewal, the legal advisor said. Yes, Jungkook replied. And if we say no? Jungkook looked at Jimin. Jimin nodded once. Then we leave, Jungkook said. The silence that followed was suffocating. The director studied them both for a long time, measuring risk, calculating backlash. You realize walking away could fracture your fanbase, he said finally. Contracts with international partners, ongoing projects. We realize, Jimin replied. Then why risk it? Jungkook answered without hesitation. Because we already almost lost something worse. The director didn't ask what. He didn't need to. The meeting ended without resolution. But it didn't feel like defeat. It felt like tectonic plates shifting. Outside the building, reporters had already gathered. Rumors of internal conflict had leaked. Cameras flashed the second they stepped out. Are you terminating your contracts? Is this about the blackmail scandal? Are you forming your own label? Voices overlapped chaotically. Jimin felt the pressure surge again, the same crushing wave that once drove him to a balcony railing. But this time, Jungkook's hand brushed against his subtly. Grounding. They stopped walking. Jungkook faced the cameras directly. We're not running, he said firmly. We're negotiating. For what? A reporter shouted. For accountability, Jimin replied. The word rippled through the crowd. Are you unhappy with your agency? Jimin didn't hesitate. We're unhappy with systems that treat survival like an inconvenience. The headlines would explode within minutes. They knew it. Back in the car, silence finally returned. Jimin leaned his head against the window, watching the city blur past. That was insane, he muttered. Jungkook let out a breathless laugh. Yeah. You really would leave? Yes. Jimin turned to look at him, even if it means starting over. Jungkook met his gaze steadily. Starting over is better than standing still somewhere that's breaking you. Jimin felt something tighten in his chest. You scare me sometimes, he admitted. Good, Jungkook replied lightly. I'm serious. So am I. Their phones buzzed non-stop. Fans were divided. Some praised their courage. Others accused them of arrogance. Industry insiders speculated about power plays. Jimin scrolled briefly before locking his screen. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, he said quietly. Jungkook's voice softened. Neither do I. A pause. But I know what yesterday almost looked like, Jungkook added. The reminder settled heavily. Jimin closed his eyes briefly. If they call our bluff. It's not a bluff. And if we fail? Jungkook considered that. Then we fail trying to build something better. Jimin let out a slow breath. The car pulled into the underground parking of their studio. Before getting out, Jungkook turned to him. No more shrinking, he said quietly. Jimin studied him. No more carrying everything alone, he replied. Jungkook nodded once. The storm wasn't over. The contracts weren't settled. The industry wasn't suddenly reformed. But something irreversible had happened. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were demanding space to live. And for the first time, the edge didn't feel like a place they were being pushed toward. It felt like a line they were drawing themselves. The contract termination clause was projected onto the wall like a loaded weapon. "Read line 17 again," the legal advisor said. Jimin's eyes skimmed the text, pulse steady but heavy. "If either party breaches public trust in a manner that materially damages corporate reputation." He didn't finish the sentence. Jungkook did. "A company reserves the right to suspend activities indefinitely." The word indefinitely echoed. The senior director folded his hands calmly. "Your press statements have already triggered shareholder instability. So speaking about mental health is a breach of public trust now?" Jungkook asked, voice sharp but controlled. "It's not what you said," the director replied. "It's how you positioned yourselves against the company." Jimin felt heat rise in his chest. "We asked for reform. You implied negligence." Because there was negligence. The room tightened again. Legal representatives exchanged glances. "You are under exclusive contract for another 18 months, the director said slowly. "Walking away is not as simple as saying the word." Jungkook leaned back in his chair for the first time since entering the room. The stillness in him now was more dangerous than the earlier anger. "We are not children you can intimidate with clauses," he said quietly. "And we are not villains," the director shot back. "No," Jimin agreed softly, "you're a corporation." That landed harder than an insult. Silence stretched. Then the door opened unexpectedly. Minyi stepped inside. Jimin's heart skipped. "What are you doing here?" The director looked startled. "Who allowed him in?" "I requested this meeting," Minyi said, voice steady despite the tension radiating from every corner of the room. The legal advisor frowned. "You are not under contract." "No," Minyi replied, "but I'm part of the problem you're trying to minimize." The director's gaze darkened. "This is highly irregular." "So we're selling footage of artists' private residences," Jungkook muttered. Minyi walked to the table and placed a printed document down. "I've submitted a formal statement to external counsel," he said, detailing the surveillance network and internal pressure tactics. The room went cold. "You went outside the company?" the legal advisor asked sharply. "Yes." "Do you realize the implications?" "Yes." Jimin watched the director's composure fracture for the first time. "You're escalating this," the director said to Jungkook and Jimin. "No," Jimin replied, "we're refusing to bury it." Minyi's voice didn't waver. "You called me unstable when I requested counseling during evaluation week. You marked me high risk. That label followed me to every other audition." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. "That's confidential internal documentation," the director snapped. "It was weaponized," Minyi shot back. Jimin's stomach twisted. He hadn't known that part. Jungkook's jaw clenched visibly. "You flagged him." "For risk assessment," the legal advisor replied defensively. "Risk of what?" Jungkook demanded. "Liability." The word echoed ugly and sterile. Jimin felt something inside him ignite. "So when I stood on that balcony," he said slowly, voice trembling not with fear but fury, "if someone had filed the right paperwork, I would have been labeled too." No one answered immediately. "That's not how it works," the director said finally. "That's exactly how it works," Minyi replied. The air felt electric now, seconds away from exploding. "You're turning this into a tribunal," the legal advisor said. "It already is," Jungkook answered. The director stood abruptly. "Enough, we are prepared to offer a revised contract." The sudden pivot caught everyone off guard. Revised how? Jimin asked cautiously. Increased creative control, public endorsement of mental health initiatives, expanded security reforms, and independent counseling, Jungkook pressed. A pause. Yes. And trainee exit transparency. Another pause, longer this time. We will review the framework. That's not an answer, Minyi said flatly. The director's eyes flashed. You have no standing here. I have scars, Minyi replied. The tension was unbearable. Jimin leaned forward. If we sign this revised contract, what happens to him? The director hesitated. He is no longer our responsibility. The words landed brutally. Jungkook laughed once humorless. There it is. You want reform that only applies to you? Minyi asked quietly. Jimin's chest tightened. No, he said firmly. Jungkook's voice cut in, decisive. We won't sign unless the reforms apply retroactively to trainees who were flagged. The legal advisor shook their head immediately. That opens legal floodgates. Then open them, Jungkook replied. The director's patience shattered. You are overestimating your leverage. Jungkook stood slowly. Are we? Silence. Outside the glass walls of the boardroom, staff pretended not to watch. The director exhaled sharply. If this becomes a public legal battle, your schedules will freeze, tour suspended, projects halted. Jimin felt the weight of that. Thousands of fans, staff, dancers, crew members who depended on those schedules. He looked at Jungkook. Jungkook met his gaze, searching, not commanding. This wasn't just about pride anymore. It was about consequence. Jimin turned back to the director. If we agree to pause negotiations publicly, he said carefully, and work privately on structural reform, will you guarantee no retaliation against former trainees who come forward? The director hesitated. The legal advisor whispered something urgently. Finally, the director spoke. We can draft a non-retaliation clause. Minyi let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. And independent oversight, Jungkook added. You're asking for an external audit, the legal advisor said incredulously. Yes. The director's jaw tightened, but he didn't immediately refuse. The power dynamic had shifted, not completely, but enough. This will take time, the director said finally. We've already given time, Jimin replied quietly. The meeting stretched for another hour. Legal language, conditions, compromises. When they finally stepped out, the air felt thinner. Minyi stopped, walking in the hallway. You didn't have to do that, he said. Yes, we did, Jungkook replied. You risked everything. Jimin looked at him steadily. So did you. Minyi's eyes shimmered faintly. I don't know if this fixes anything. It doesn't, Jungkook admitted. Not immediately. But it starts something, Jimin added. Minyi nodded slowly. You're not obligated to stand with us publicly, Jimin said gently. This might get messy. Minyi let out a faint, tired laugh. It's already messy. They shared a quiet understanding. Later that night, Jungkook and Jimin sat alone in the studio again. No cameras, no executives. Just the low hum of equipment. You almost walked away today, Jimin said softly. I still might, Jungkook admitted. Jimin turned toward him. If they stall. Yes. And if it costs us. Jungkook didn't answer immediately. It already cost us, he said finally. Peace, privacy, illusions. Jimin exhaled slowly. Do you regret going live that first night? Jungkook shook his head. Do you? Jimin thought about the balcony, the text, the fear, the blackmail, the boardroom. No, he said. Jungkook's expression softened. You're shaking again, he he observed quietly. Adrenaline, Jimin replied. Jungkook reached over, fingers brushing Jimin's wrist. Not shrinking, he reminded him. Jimin held his gaze. Not carrying alone, he replied. Outside, headlines were already forming. Contract standoff. Artists challenge agency power. Industry reckoning. The storm was no longer private. It was systemic. And for the first time, Jimin didn't feel like he was standing near an edge. He felt like he was standing in the center of something that might actually shift the ground beneath all of them. The final negotiation didn't happen in a boardroom. It happened in silence. 3 weeks after the leak, after the suspension, after the independent broadcast that fractured the industry wide open, the company released a statement no one expected. Not a denial, not a deflection, an admission. They acknowledged systemic failures in trainee mental health management. They announced the creation of an independent oversight committee. They confirmed retroactive outreach to former trainees flagged under outdated risk classifications. They removed the volatility index from internal evaluations entirely. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't heroic. But it was real. Jimin read the statement 3 times before putting his phone down. They actually did it, he murmured. Jungkook leaned against the studio wall, arms crossed, exhaustion etched into every line of his posture. Pressure works. They didn't have to include former trainees. No, Jungkook agreed, they didn't. A new contract sat on the table between them, revised, transparent clauses, independent counseling guaranteed, non-retaliation protections written in language that couldn't be twisted easily. Jimin stared at the pages. You still want to sign? Jungkook asked quietly. Jimin looked up. Weeks ago, that question would have carried fear. Now it carried choice. I don't want to stay because we're trapped, Jimin said slowly. I want to stay because something changed. And did it? Jungkook pressed. Jimin thought about Minyi, who had been invited to consult with the new oversight team, about anonymous trainees who had finally received formal apologies, about fans who had written messages saying they felt seen for the first time. Yes, Jimin said. Not everything, but enough. Jungkook studied him carefully. You're sure? Jimin smiled faintly. I'm not shrinking. A corner of Jungkook's mouth lifted. They signed, not as an act of surrender, as an act of reclamation. The announcement went public that evening. Activities would resume under a new mental health initiative spearheaded jointly by artists and independent professionals. The suspension was lifted. The storm, while not erased, had shifted direction. Back in the studio, long after the staff had left, Jimin sat alone at the piano. He pressed a single key. The note echoed softly. Jungkook walked in quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. You're humming, Jungkook observed. Jimin paused, then smiled to himself. Am I? Yeah, but it's different. How? Less like you're trying to drown something out. Jimin considered that. He had spent years mistaking silence for strength, years believing that enduring quietly was the same as healing. He turned slightly on the piano bench. I used to think staying meant surviving, he said softly, like holding on to the railing and not falling. Jungkook handed him the coffee, and now I think staying means choosing to exist fully, not just barely. Jungkook sat beside him. Outside the window, the city lights shimmered against the night sky. The same skyline that once blurred through tears now looked steady. You know, Jungkook said, voice casual but laced with something deeper, I never told you something about that night. Jimin glanced at him. What? When I texted you, I almost didn't. Jimin's fingers stilled over the keys. I thought you'd be annoyed, Jungkook continued. I thought maybe I was overreacting, but something in me said if I didn't send it, I'd regret it. Jimin swallowed. That text wasn't heroic, Jungkook said. It was impulsive. It was everything, Jimin replied. Silence wrapped around them, but it wasn't heavy. It was warm. Jimin stood and walked toward the small table where Jungkook's laptop rested. He opened it and clicked into the familiar folder. There it was. The playlist. For the days when you're tired. He hovered over it for a moment, then clicked edit. Jungkook watched him curiously. What are you doing? Jimin didn't answer immediately. He changed the title. For the days when you choose to stay. Jungkook's breath caught faintly. Jimin looked at him. I don't want it to just be about exhaustion anymore, he said. I want it to be about decision. Jungkook stood slowly, walking closer. You're crying, he observed softly. Jimin laughed through it. I know. But these tears weren't born from shame. They weren't quiet apologies for being too much. They were release. You saved those songs on my worst days, Jimin said, but I want to add something. He began scrolling, adding new tracks. Songs from the weeks of confrontation, from the day they stood in front of cameras and refused to bend, from the night Minnie walked out of the studio not as an enemy, but as someone who chose not to fall into bitterness. Each addition felt deliberate. A record not of collapse, but of resilience. Jungkook watched silently. You're not afraid of being labeled anymore, he asked gently. Jimin shook his head. They can call me emotional, volatile, sensitive. He closed the laptop softly. But I'm still here. The words settled between them like a vow. Jungkook stepped closer, close enough that their shoulders touched. You know what scares me now? Jungkook asked quietly. What? That one day we'll forget how close we came to losing this. Jimin thought about the balcony, the files, the threats, the boardroom standoff. We won't, he said. How do you know? Because we didn't just survive it, we changed because of it. Jungkook nodded slowly. The journey hadn't erased fear. It hadn't made them invincible. But it had redefined strength. Not as silence, not as perfection, but as presence. Jimin picked up his phone and opened a new message. To Jungkook. He typed 2 words. You ate. Jungkook's phone buzzed in his hand. He looked down, then back up at Jimin, a slow smile spreading across his face. Annoying, Jungkook said softly. Anchoring, Jimin corrected. Outside, the city moved on, headlines faded, trends shifted, new scandals would come. But inside that quiet studio, something steady remained. Not a brand, not a narrative, not a performance, just 2 people who learned that staying isn't passive. It's a choice made again and again, especially on the days when you're tired. And this time, neither of them was standing near the edge alone.